The small dojo was filled with the sound of young voices. White uniforms moved here and there, small feet hit the wooden floor, and the air was alive with energy. It was a normal afternoon class. Children and teenagers stretched, some punched the air, some laughed at their own mistakes. The smell of polish and sweat mixed together, giving the room the feeling of hard work and discipline. The students were excited because today was special. A new batch of people was joining the karate class. Everyone wondered who it would be this time. New students always brought fresh energy, sometimes even fresh competition. Nobody expected anything unusual. The door creaked open slowly. At first, no one paid attention. But when the figure stepped inside, the entire room went quiet. It was an old woman. Her skin was dark, her back a little bent with age, and her steps slow but steady. She wore a plain dress, not a karate uniform, and held a small bag in her hand. Her gray hair was tied back neatly, and her face carried deep lines, the kind that only come from years of living, years of struggle, and years of wisdom. For a few seconds, the students only stared. And then, the whispers began. "Is she lost?" one boy muttered under his breath. "She can't be here for karate," another girl giggled. "Maybe she's someone's grandmother," a teenager said with a smirk. The old woman looked around the dojo with calm eyes. She didn't seem angry at the whispers. Instead, her face was peaceful, almost as if she had expected this reaction. She walked slowly toward the mat, her bag clutched in her hand. Each step echoed in the silent room. The students could not hold back anymore. A wave of laughter broke out. Some tried to cover their mouths, but others laughed openly. They imagined the old woman trying to kick, trying to punch, maybe even falling down. To them, it was a joke. But the sensei did not laugh. He was a tall man with sharp eyes, standing quietly near the front of the room. He had seen many students over the years, strong ones, weak ones, arrogant ones, and humble ones. But something about this old woman made him pause. He did not speak right away. He simply watched her. The woman reached the edge of the mat and stopped. She placed her bag down and bowed slowly, her movements filled with respect. The laughter grew louder behind her, but she did not turn her head. She did not scold them. She simply stayed still, waiting. The sensei finally stepped forward. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. "May I ask why you are here, ma'am?" All eyes turned to her. Some students whispered again, waiting to hear a funny answer. The old woman straightened her back as much as she could and spoke softly, but clearly. "I am here to learn." The words fell into the air like a stone into water. The laughter stopped for a moment, replaced with surprise. Some students blinked. Others raised their eyebrows. "To learn karate?" one bold teenager asked loudly, half laughing. The old woman turned her head slowly toward him. Her eyes were sharp, deep, and steady. For a second, the boy felt something heavy in that gaze, something he could not explain. He looked away, embarrassed. The sensei studied her face. He could see it now, beneath the wrinkles and the gray hair was a determination he had seen before. A fire that only serious students carried. This was not a joke for her. This was something else, something the others could not understand yet. But the students were restless. "Sensei, she can't join," one girl protested. "She's too old, she will get hurt," another said. "This is not a place for someone like her," a boy added, shaking his head. The whispers turned into noise again. The dojo was filled with doubt and judgment. But the woman stood silently, her hands resting in front of her, her body calm like a mountain that did not move with the wind. Finally, the sensei raised his hand, and the room fell quiet. His eyes never left the woman's face. "Do you truly wish to learn karate?" he asked again, this time in a serious tone. The old woman bowed once more, her voice soft but filled with unshaken strength. "Yes, sensei. I wish to learn." The students exchanged shocked looks. Some rolled their eyes. Others whispered again, unable to believe what they were hearing. But the sensei's expression remained thoughtful. Deep inside, he already knew this was not going to be an ordinary day. In that moment, no one could have guessed what was about to happen. No one knew the truth hidden inside the old woman's heart. No one realized that very soon, laughter would turn into silence, and disrespect would turn into awe. For now, she was just an old grandmother standing on the mat of a karate dojo. But the silence after her words carried a strange weight, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something powerful to begin. And it had just begun. The dojo was still buzzing with whispers. The old woman's calm answer had surprised everyone, but the shock quickly turned back into laughter. The young students could not believe what they were seeing. To them, karate was about speed, power, and strength. And here stood an old grandmother, with wrinkled hands and slow steps, claiming she wanted to learn. One boy leaned toward his friend and whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "She can't even lift her leg. How will she kick?" The friend chuckled. "Maybe she'll try, and then she'll fall." A group of teenagers laughed, covering their mouths only when the sensei glanced their way. The old woman heard every word, but she did not react. Her face stayed calm, her eyes steady. She stood with her hands folded, waiting for the sensei's instructions, as if the cruel words did not matter at all. The sensei looked at his students with disappointment. He had taught them discipline, respect, and patience. Yet here they were, judging someone before they had even seen her try. Still, he chose to remain silent for now. He wanted to see how far the old woman's spirit would go. "Join the line," he said finally, pointing to the back row where the new students always stood. The old woman nodded and walked slowly to her place. The wooden floor creaked beneath her steps, and a few students giggled again. She ignored them completely. She placed her bag down, adjusted her posture, and stood tall, her back straightened with quiet pride. The warm-up began. The sensei called for stretches. The young ones bent their bodies with ease, touching their toes, twisting their waists, and swinging their arms quickly. The old woman moved slower, but her form was careful. She did not rush, she did not complain, she simply did each stretch as best as she could. Yet the laughter continued. "Look at her, she's so stiff," one girl whispered. "She looks like she'll break if she bends too much," another boy said. The whispers spread like fire, each cruel word stabbing the air. The sensei's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. He wanted to see how the woman would handle it. Minutes passed, and the exercises grew harder. The students jumped, kicked, and punched the air. The old woman tried each movement with steady effort. Her punches were slow but precise. Her kicks did not rise high, but her balance never wavered. The teenagers laughed louder now. "She's punching like in slow motion," one boy said. "I bet even my little sister hits harder than that," another added. The dojo filled with chuckles and mocking voices. Some students even mimicked her movements, exaggerating them for comedy. The atmosphere grew heavier with disrespect. But the old woman still did not break. Her face stayed calm, her breathing steady. Every move she made carried patience and focus. She was not here to compete with children, she was here for something deeper. Something none of them could see yet. At one point, a teenage boy leaned closer to another and whispered loudly, "I don't get it. Why is she even here? Karate is for strong people, not for grandmothers." The words made a few others laugh harder. But in that moment, the sensei's voice thundered across the room. "Enough!" The laughter stopped instantly. The students froze, their eyes wide. The sensei rarely raised his voice, but when he did, it carried power. The dojo fell into complete silence. He looked at the laughing students one by one. His eyes were sharp, his tone firm. Karate is not about mocking others. It is not about judging who looks strong and who looks weak. Karate is about respect. And right now, many of you are failing. The students lowered their heads, shame spreading across their faces. None of them dared to laugh anymore. The old woman, however, only bowed her head slightly toward the sensei. She did not smile, she did not gloat. Her eyes were humble, as if she had not even noticed the insults. Her spirit was calm, like still water that could not be disturbed by stones thrown at it. The sensei studied her quietly. He could see it more clearly now, the discipline in her silence, the strength in her patience. This was not weakness. This was something much greater. He turned to the class and spoke again. You laugh at her now. But remember, true karate is not shown in speed or strength alone. True karate is shown in spirit, in respect, in the will to keep going when others want you to stop. The room was silent. The students shifted uncomfortably, some looking at the old woman with new eyes. But still, not everyone was convinced. Deep inside, many of them thought the same thing: she cannot last long. She will quit soon. She will give up. What they did not know was that this old woman was about to show them something that would change their thinking forever. For now, though, she remained in the back row, moving slowly, breathing calmly, her heart filled with a quiet strength that nobody could measure. The mockery had started, but the true test was still waiting ahead. The class moved into its next stage. Warm-ups were over. Now came the practice drills, the part where every student had to show their skills. The air in the dojo felt sharper, more serious. The sensei stood at the front, his arms folded. His eyes moved across the rows of students. Most of them stood straight, excited and eager to impress. But his gaze stopped again on the old woman in the back row. She stood calmly, her hands resting by her side, her breathing steady. She looked out of place, yet her presence carried a strange weight, as if she belonged there in a way no one else could understand. The sensei spoke. Now, we test our focus. Each of you will perform the basic sequence. Punch. Block. Kick. The students nodded eagerly. For them, this was routine. They had done it many times before. Their young bodies were fast, flexible, and filled with energy. The sequence began. One by one, the students stepped forward. Their punches sliced the air, their blocks were sharp, their kicks high and fast. The room echoed with the sound of effort, the smack of fists, the thud of feet, the shouts of young voices giving energy to their moves. And then, it was her turn. The dojo grew quiet. Every eye turned toward the old woman as she stepped slowly onto the mat. She bowed with respect to the sensei and took her position. Some students smirked, already expecting a disaster. Others leaned closer to watch, eager for a mistake they could laugh at later. The air was thick with judgment. The sensei gave a small nod. Begin. The old woman raised her hands. Her movements were slow, but precise. Her fist moved forward in a punch, not powerful, not fast, but controlled. Her block followed, her arm moving with perfect form. Then came her kick, lower than the others, but balanced and steady. The students were ready to laugh, but something stopped them. There was no clumsiness in her movement. No wobble, no hesitation. Each step was deliberate, clean, almost graceful. The sensei's eyes narrowed with interest. He could see it now, her body was slow, but her technique was exact. Every angle, every position, was correct. This was not the movement of a beginner. Again, he ordered. She repeated the sequence. Punch. Block. Kick. Again, the same precision. Again, the same control. Whispers spread among the students. She's actually good, one boy muttered. How is she moving like that? Another asked. Some still shook their heads, refusing to believe. It's just luck, a teenager said. She's copying the moves. She won't last long. But the sensei knew better. He had trained too many students not to recognize true discipline. Her posture, her breathing, the focus in her eyes, all of it spoke of experience. This was not someone copying. This was someone remembering. The sensei decided to test her further. He called out, partner drills. Immediately, the students paired up. They faced each other, preparing to block and counter each other's strikes. Laughter returned when one boy realized he had been matched with the old woman. This is going to be easy, he whispered to his friends, smirking. I'll go easy so she doesn't break. The others chuckled, waiting to see what would happen. The boy stepped forward, raising his fist. Ready, Grandma, he said mockingly. The old woman bowed politely. Ready. The boy threw a slow punch, expecting her to miss. But in an instant, her arm moved, not fast, but perfectly timed. She blocked it smoothly, her stance solid. The boy blinked in surprise. Ha! He tried again, a little faster. She blocked again, steady as a rock. The room fell quiet. On the third attempt, he went even harder, throwing a punch with real force. This time, her hand moved with surprising sharpness, blocking his strike and gently pushing his arm away. The boy stumbled backward, his balance broken. Gasps filled the room. The old woman lowered her hands calmly, her face expressionless. She had not hurt him. She had not even moved aggressively. She had simply shown control. The sensei's lips curved slightly, almost into a smile. He could see the truth now. This was no ordinary beginner. But the students were restless. Some were impressed, some were confused, and others were still not ready to accept it. She must have gotten lucky, one girl whispered. Yeah, it's just a fluke, another agreed quickly. But deep inside, doubt was growing. For the first time, they realized the old woman might not be what she seemed. The sensei clapped his hands once. Enough. Back in line. The boy bowed quickly, his face red with embarrassment, while the old woman bowed gracefully and returned to her place. The dojo was filled with silence now. No one laughed. No one mocked. The air was heavy with curiosity and a strange sense of respect that had started to form, even if the students did not admit it yet. The sensei looked at the woman one last time before speaking. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of recognition in it. You carry experience, he said softly. The old woman only lowered her head, saying nothing. But her eyes held a quiet truth, a history that no one in the room yet understood. The first test was over. But something told everyone watching that this was only the beginning. The dojo was strangely quiet. The old woman had blocked the boy's punches with ease, and that single moment had shaken the entire class. The students could no longer laugh so freely. They exchanged uneasy glances, whispering behind their hands. Something about her did not feel ordinary anymore. The sensei stood still, his sharp eyes fixed on her. For a long moment, he said nothing. He was thinking. His years of teaching had taught him one thing: true skill could never be hidden, not even by time. And what he had just seen in this woman's movements, it was not luck. It was the spirit of training, the memory of discipline that only real karate students carried. Finally, the sensei spoke. His deep voice cut through the silence. Step forward. The old woman bowed slightly and obeyed. Her steps were slow but steady, her presence calm but commanding. The younger students held their breath, watching her walk to the front of the mat. The sensei studied her carefully. You have practiced before, he said softly. The old woman did not answer right away. She looked at him with quiet eyes, then gave a small nod. Long ago, she whispered. A ripple went through the room. The students leaned closer, curious now. The laughter was gone, in its place was a rising tension, a question waiting to be answered: how much had she really practiced? The sensei lifted his hand. Show us. Perform the kata. Gasps filled the room. The kata was not a simple exercise. It was a series of movements that tested memory, discipline, and skill. For beginners, it was confusing. For trained students, it was a way to show mastery. The old woman bowed deeply. She moved to the center of the mat, standing tall despite her age. The room went silent again. Even the air seemed to hold still. Then she began. Her arms rose slowly but with purpose. Her fist struck forward, sharp, precise, filled with focus. Her body turned, her stance solid, her block firm and exact. Her movements flowed one after another, not fast like the young students, but smooth, powerful, and graceful. Every strike carried control. Every step echoed with discipline. Her breathing was steady, her posture perfect. The students were stunned. they had expected clumsy mistakes, maybe even a fall. Instead, they were watching something entirely different: an art, a mastery hidden behind wrinkles and gray hair. One boy whispered, almost in awe, "She moves like a master." Another girl shook her head slowly. "No, she moves like someone who has done this her whole life." The dojo was so silent that the sound of her foot touching the floor felt loud. Her final move came sharp and precise, her hands locking into a finishing stance. She froze there, her body steady, her eyes burning with calm strength. The sensei's eyes softened. For the first time since she had entered, his lips curved into the faintest smile. He stepped forward and bowed his head slightly toward her. The students gasped again. The sensei rarely bowed first to anyone. "You honor this dojo," he said firmly. The old woman bowed back, her expression humble. She had not moved to impress. She had not performed to silence the children. She had only done what was natural to her, what had lived inside her body and spirit for decades. The students shifted uneasily. The ones who had laughed the loudest now stared at the floor, ashamed. The ones who had doubted were quiet, their eyes wide. Slowly, their mocking smiles faded, replaced by something new: respect, even if they did not want to admit it yet. But the sensei was not finished. He turned to the students and raised his voice. "Do you see? You judged her by her age. You judged her by her appearance. But karate is not about young or old. It is not about skin or strength. It is about spirit. And her spirit is stronger than many of yours." The students bowed their heads lower, guilt burning in their chests. The old woman only stood silently, her hands folded once more. She did not gloat. She did not seek praise. She was calm, like still water after a storm. But deep inside the students, something had changed. They no longer saw her as a fragile grandmother who had walked in by mistake. Now, they saw her as someone mysterious, someone powerful, someone carrying a hidden past they could not yet understand. The sensei gave her a respectful nod. "You may join the class," he said firmly. And in that moment, the dojo itself felt different. The laughter was gone, replaced by silence and awe. No one knew the full story yet. No one knew why she had returned, why she had chosen to step into this dojo after so many years. But one thing was certain: this was no ordinary student. The reveal had come, and with it, respect. And this was only the beginning. The dojo was still heavy with silence. The old woman's kata had changed everything. The same students who laughed minutes ago now stared at her with wide eyes, their faces filled with confusion and respect. She bowed once more and slowly stepped back to her place in the line. Her breathing was calm, her movements gentle, but there was no weakness in her. Only strength, the kind of strength that did not shout, but whispered with dignity. The sensei stood tall at the front, his sharp eyes moving from the students to the old woman. His voice carried deep meaning when he finally spoke. "You all saw what just happened. Strength of the body fades with time. But strength of spirit does not fade. That is why she stands here, stronger than many of you." The students bowed their heads. Shame filled their hearts as they remembered their laughter, their mocking words. None of them dared to look directly at her now. The sensei turned to the old woman. "Tell them. Tell my students why you have returned to karate after so many years." The old woman hesitated. She held her hands together, her eyes fixed on the wooden floor for a moment. Then, slowly, she raised her head. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the dojo with surprising strength. "When I was young, I trained every day. Karate was not just practice for me. It was my way of life. I learned discipline. I learned respect. And I learned that true strength is not in the fist but in the heart." The students listened quietly. The air was filled with her words. She continued, her eyes growing distant, as if she was seeing memories from long ago. "But life is not always kind. I had to stop my training. My family needed me. My children needed me. So I put my GI away, and I worked, and I lived as a mother, as a wife, as someone who gave everything to her family. I thought my time with karate was over. Her voice trembled slightly, but she did not stop. Years passed. My children grew, my husband passed, and I became a grandmother. But even as the world changed, the spirit of karate never left me. It lived here. She placed a hand gently over her chest. It was waiting inside me, silent but alive. The students leaned forward, their eyes fixed on her. Even the teenagers who had laughed the most were silent now. The old woman's eyes softened. I came back here, not to prove that I am strong. I am not here to win medals or to fight. I came back because I wanted to show myself and maybe show others that it is never too late. Age does not matter. What matters is the will to keep moving, to keep learning, and to keep respecting life. The dojo remained silent. Some students swallowed hard, others lowered their eyes, ashamed of their earlier mockery. The sensei nodded slowly. His voice was firm but respectful. You have given my students a lesson greater than any punch or kick could teach. Today they have seen that respect must never depend on age, color, or appearance. Respect is given to the spirit. He turned to his class. Bow to her. The students hesitated for a moment, then one by one, they bent forward. The sound of dozens of feet shifting against the wooden floor filled the room. Young boys, teenage girls, and even the boy who had mocked her most all bowed deeply to the old woman. She bowed back humbly, her face calm. She did not smile with pride. She did not show superiority. She accepted their respect with quiet dignity. For the first time that day, the dojo felt different. The energy had shifted. The students were no longer just children playing at karate. They had been reminded of its true meaning. But inside many of them, another feeling began to grow: curiosity. Who was this woman, really? How much had she trained in her past? And why had she chosen this dojo, this exact moment, to return? The sensei saw the questions in their eyes, but he did not answer. Instead, he gave the students a final message. Never forget what you witnessed today. True karate is not about defeating others. True karate is about defeating the weakness inside yourself. And today, this woman has shown you that lesson better than I could. The students bowed once more, this time with genuine respect, not out of fear of their teacher. The old woman stood quietly, her heart steady. She had not planned to give a lesson. She had only followed the voice inside her that told her to return. But perhaps this was why she had come, not for herself, but for them. And though the class ended, the memory of that day would remain in every student's heart. But the story was not over. The greatest moment of respect was still to come. The class was almost over. The students lined up in silence, their eyes still stealing glances at the old woman who stood calmly among them. No one laughed anymore. No one whispered. The dojo that had once been filled with giggles and mocking was now heavy with respect. The sensei stood at the front, his hands folded behind his back. His face was serious, but in his eyes there was something rare: pride. Not the pride of a teacher for his strongest student, but the pride of witnessing the true spirit of karate. He looked at the class and spoke firmly. Today, you all received a lesson that no textbook, no kata, and no training could give you. You saw how quickly you judged. You saw how easily you mocked. And you saw how wrong you were. The students lowered their heads. Shame burned in their cheeks. Some clenched their fists, not in anger, but in regret. The sensei's voice softened. Karate is not about power. It is not about youth. It is not about appearance. Karate is about spirit, respect, and discipline. This woman has shown you all what that truly means. He turned then, and to everyone's shock, he bowed deeply toward the old woman. Gasps filled the room. The sensei, the master of the dojo, bowing first, it was almost unheard of. The students looked at one another, unsure what to do. The old woman's eyes widened slightly, but she bowed back with equal respect, her movements humble and graceful. Then, slowly, the sensei raised his head and spoke again. From this day on, she is not just a student. She is an example. Watch her. Learn from her. Respect her. The students did not hesitate this time. As one, they bowed deeply toward her. The sound of dozens of voices saying OSS filled the dojo, powerful and sincere. The old woman bowed once more, her face calm. But deep inside, her heart was heavy with emotion. For so many years, she had buried this part of herself. She had thought her time with karate was over, nothing more than a memory. Yet here she was, standing tall, honored, respected, not for her age, not for her race, but for the spirit she carried. The boy who had mocked her the most stepped forward after the bow. His face was red, his voice soft. I am sorry, he said, bowing his head low. I should not have laughed. The old woman placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Her voice was kind. It is never wrong to be young. But it is wrong to forget respect. Now you know. That is enough. The boy nodded quickly, his eyes filled with something new, admiration. One by one, other students stepped closer. Some gave small bows, some whispered apologies, others simply looked at her with wide, respectful eyes. The energy in the dojo was no longer filled with arrogance. It was filled with humility. The sensei clapped his hands once, signaling the end of the class. Line dismissed. The students began to leave, but their eyes lingered on the old woman as they passed. Some smiled shyly, others nodded politely. For them, this day had become unforgettable. When the dojo was almost empty, the sensei approached her. For a moment, he did not speak. Then he said quietly, "You are more than a student. You are a teacher, even if you do not see yourself that way." The old woman bowed deeply. "Thank you, Sensei. I only wanted to remember who I was." I did not expect. She looked around the dojo, her eyes glistening. "This." The sensei gave her a small, respectful smile. "Sometimes, the spirit of karate chooses its own moment to return. You have given more than you know." The old woman picked up her small bag and prepared to leave. Her steps were slow, her back still bent with age, but the aura around her was different now. She no longer looked like just someone's grandmother. She looked like a warrior whose battle had never truly ended. As she reached the door, the remaining students bowed once more, unprompted. Their voices rose together, OSS. She turned slightly, her face soft with emotion, and bowed back one last time before stepping outside. The wooden door closed gently behind her, but the impact of her presence remained in the dojo. The students would never forget the day they laughed at the old woman, only to bow to her in respect. And from that day forward, whenever new students joined the class, the sensei would tell them the story of the grandmother who had returned, not to prove her strength, but to remind everyone of the true meaning of karate. The lesson was clear: never judge a person by their age, their color, or their appearance. True strength lives in the spirit, and the spirit never grows old.